Caribou Honey album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Mr. Dan Snaith, aka Caribou. He has been at it since the early 2000s. Electronic artist, music producer. The man's done it all and he's recorded under a few names, aka Manitoba, Daphne, but the music that I am most familiar with when it comes to Dan's music is his work under the Caribou name, which he's had a pretty decent run with. And not only that, the man has also touched down around a lot of different styles of music since his debut. And when he started off with his album, The Milk of Human Kindness, he was going for a much more sunny, folktronic, neo-psych sound. And even though it's not my favorite project from him, and some of the interludes just really didn't need to be there, there's just such a blissful, youthful energy about this record that makes me really happy. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. With his next record, Andorra, I became a full-blown mega fan overnight. This took a lot of the sounds of his debut record, the very sunny, neo-psych oriented. Psych pop and dream pop as well. Dan touched down on a lot of different sounds on this record, but honestly, he nailed most of them. But Dan didn't stop there because Swim, the album he followed it up with, is the best thing that he's ever done as far as I'm concerned. This was a much more focused, driving album that was more centered on beats, house music, deep house with a serious neo-psych, very colorful edge to it, but the man nailed it. It is just such a true testament to his production style, his sound as a whole. And Our Love, while honestly not my favorite record from him either, it still has a slew of really meditative, really interesting deep house track. Now, the last time that we heard from Dan was with his Suddenly album, which at the time I really enjoyed, and since it dropped, I've enjoyed it more and more. Also, if you want even more stuff to dive into, that Daphne record Dan dropped 2 years ago or so ago, really cool stuff. Now, honestly, leading up to this record, I've been really pumped for this thing because most of the singles that Dan's been dropping are some of the cooler ones that he's dropped in a really long time. Like this album's title track, Honey, early on the record, this gets the party going. This track I've loved since it dropped as a single. This is just classic Caribou by the books. It's got a sense of urgency to it as well. Dan doesn't waste a single second. It's glitchy, it's fresh, the sampling's really cool too, and when this beat hits, look out. I also really love the sort of eerie synths that are floating out of reach. Everything about this track's really crisp, but with volume, my God, this album really starts taking off. This track is awesome. I've loved it since it dropped as a single. The vocal snippet, the glitzy beat, everything about this track is just so commanding. Yeah, this one seriously packs some heat. I mean, most of the tracks on this album definitely invite you to the dance floor, but this one drags you onto it. The synths are bouncy, and the production is mesmerizing, honestly. Some of the sound play here just sounds so good. I really do love Do Without You as well. It's short, it's sweet, but there's something really hypnotizing about this cut. Like, I love how carefree and airy this comes off. I mean, Dan just all around packed a lot into this 2-minute cut. It has a lot going for it. And for me, Come Find Me was the single that hit me the hardest and the quickest. It's one of the more subtle tracks here, at least at the start. And that's okay by me because this track really progresses nicely. Synth after groovy synth, hypnotic vocal snippet after hypnotic vocal snippet. This track is awesome. When Dan focuses, the man can absolutely make magic, and that's what this track is. I mean, the way that this track builds gives me the chills just thinking about it. It's easily one of the best dance and electronic singles I've heard all year. Now, here's my issue. There are a handful of tracks on this record that are just very average, and that's really disappointing because so much of this record is so good. But like Broke My Heart, as an intro to this record, I haven't been into this since it dropped as a single. I think this one's clunky as anything. It's just so oddly tinny, and it just doesn't sound good. Even when the beat drops here, this is just not a very appealing cut. And from a master like Dan, I just expect a lot more. August 2024, I mean, this one just sounds really unfinished. It's got a cool idea or so, but don't expect anything to come of it. It doesn't really go anywhere. And Only You, late in the album, just seems kind of phoned in to me. Like, why does this sound like a really very average old school Toro et Moi track? Songwriting-wise, this sucks, and production-wise, this is flimsy. It's just not up to the quality of the rest of the record, which, thankfully for Dan, he does knock out of the park. Like Dear Life, for example, this is one of the busiest cuts here. This one does not waste a single second, pouring in heavy synths and hypnotic vocal snippets. And it's exciting. A lot of these vocal snippets and guest vocalists that pop onto this record, for the most part, sound right at home. It's pretty damn exciting, as is Over Now. I love the shimmering 80s gleam of this track. It's something I've never really heard from Dan before. It's one of the harder to place cuts here, but that's far from a bad thing. It's glistening, it's feel good, and when that big bassy beat drops, oh, does it ever come off great. It's one of the coolest deep cuts here, and I love the positivity. Campfire's really cool too. This one brings in some of his classic folktronica elements. Hell yes. It's got some tension. I don't mind the rapped verse, and the callback to the Broke My Heart single from earlier is better and more compelling than the track itself. It's odd in a sense that it's pretty deconstructed for Dan, but it really comes off well. And Climbing may be my favorite deep cut here. It's a glistening, soaring track that's just so busy but so fresh sounding. It's just so full of life, and it has these carefree vibes that are just impossible to feel bad around. It's tracks like this from Dan that I'll always go for. And Got to Change as a finale is just plain cool. It's bubbly, it's quirky, it's just got this glitchiness to it that hasn't been apparent on this whole record, but I'm glad it's here now. This track just has this building energy that's just so infectious, and once again, really memorable vocal snippet. It's a celebratory finish that salutes a lot of sounds that Dan has worked with, and it works for me quite a bit. I mean, man, there's a lot of this album that packs some serious heat to it. I mean, some of the singles are some of the best electronic and dance singles you're gonna hear all year. Yeah, it does get a little mellow at times, and there's just some tracks on here that I just know Dan can do a lot better with and put out some more interesting stuff. But still, the man is still just so consistent at this point, and most of this record is just a blast. I'm feeling a very strong 7 on this record, but let me know what you all think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.